You can't marry her, Akaraka said bluntly, her tone firm and uncompromising. Princess of Umore, with due respect, please let my son be. Once upon a time, in a village called Umore, there was a wise and kind king named Ezenna. He ruled the land with fairness and everyone in the kingdom loved him. King Ezenna was married to a beautiful queen named Olako. She was gentle and kind-hearted, and her smile could brighten even the gloomiest day. But despite their happiness, there was one thing missing in their lives: a child. For 5 long years, King Ezenna and Queen Olako prayed and hoped for a baby, but none came their way. This made the king very sad, for he longed to have an heir to carry on his legacy. One day, feeling disheartened, King Ezenna went to the village priest for advice. The wise priest listened to the king's worries and then spoke gently. "Fear not, your majesty. In due time, you will be blessed with a child." Hearing these comforting words, the king felt a glimmer of hope in his heart. He returned to the palace with renewed faith, knowing that one day his dream of becoming a father would come true. As days passed, Queen Olako began to notice some changes in her body. At first, she was unsure of what was happening, but as time went on, other women in the village noticed too. They whispered among themselves, sharing their own experiences with similar changes. One sunny afternoon, Olako decided to confide in her husband, King Ezenna, about the strange happenings. Concerned for his beloved queen, King Ezenna summoned the palace midwife to examine her. After a thorough examination, the midwife declared that Queen Olako was expecting a child. The palace erupted in joyous celebration upon hearing the news. King Ezenna thanked the gods for keeping their promise and blessing him and his queen with a child. He hoped and prayed that the child would be a son who would one day succeed him as a king. Every day, King Ezenna silently offered prayers for the health and well-being of Queen Olako and their unborn child. He eagerly awaited the day when he would finally hold his son in his arms. As the months went by, Queen Olako's belly grew larger and the anticipation in the palace grew stronger. Finally, the day arrived when Queen Olako went into labor. The palace midwife was summoned once again, and after hours of waiting, the cry of a baby filled the air. King Ezenna's heart swelled with joy at the sound. The midwife announced the sex of the baby, and although the king felt a mix of emotions, he thanked the gods for blessing his palace with the cry of a newborn baby. The palace was filled with happiness and excitement as the news of the baby's arrival spread throughout the kingdom. The people rejoiced, knowing that their beloved king and queen had been blessed with a child. And so, as the sun set on another day in Umore, the people offered prayers of gratitude to the gods for their endless blessings and the miracle of a new life. Princess Adaobi, the newborn daughter of King Ezenna and Queen Olako, was welcomed into the palace with joy and celebration. She was a beautiful and gentle baby, with eyes that sparkled like the stars in the night sky and a smile that could light up the entire kingdom. As Princess Adaobi grew, she proved to be a delight to everyone in the palace. She was kind and compassionate, always eager to help others in any way she could. Despite being born into royalty, Adaobi remained humble and down to earth, treating everyone with kindness and respect. The king and queen adored their daughter and doted on her every moment. They watched with pride as Adobe took her first steps and spoke her first words. The palace was filled with laughter and happiness whenever Adobe was around. However, as Princess Adobe grew older, King Ezenna began to long for another child. He wished for a son who would one day inherit the throne and continue his legacy. Despite their prayers and hopes, Queen Olako did not conceive again. The king's desire for another child weighed heavily on his heart. He sought the advice of the village elders and consulted with the palace priests. But no matter what he tried, Queen Olako remained unable to conceive. Meanwhile, Princess Adobe continued to grow into a kind and gracious young girl. She spent her days playing in the palace gardens, singing with the birds, and learning from the wise elders of the kingdom. She was loved by all who knew her, and her gentle spirit touched the hearts of everyone she met. Despite the joy that Princess Adobe brought to the palace, King Ezenna could not shake the longing for another child. He prayed to the gods fervently, hoping for a miracle that would bless him with a son. Months turned into years, and still Queen Olako did not conceive. The king's heart grew heavy with sorrow, for he feared that his dream of having a son would never come true. But despite his disappointment, King Ezenna never let his longing overshadow the love he had for Princess Adobe. She remained the light of his life, and he cherished every moment he spent with her. As the years passed, Princess Adobe blossomed into a young woman of remarkable beauty and grace. She was admired by all who beheld her, yet she remained humble and kind, never letting her royal status define her. And so, as the sun set on another day in the kingdom of Umore, King Ezenna continued to pray for a miracle that would grant him the son he so desperately desired. But no matter what the future held, one thing was certain: Princess Adobe would always be the beloved jewel of the palace, bringing joy and happiness to all who knew her. In the kingdom of Umore, life continued to unfold with its own rhythm and mysteries. Princess Adobe grew into a radiant young woman, known throughout the land for her kindness and compassion. She spent her days tending to the needs of the people, visiting the sick and elderly, and lending a helping hand whenever she could. Despite her busy schedule, Adobe always made time for her parents, King Ezenna and Queen Olako. She would sit with them in the palace gardens, listening to their stories and sharing her own dreams and aspirations. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, and the palace was filled with love and laughter whenever they were together. As for King Ezenna, his longing for a son never waned. He continued to pray to the gods, hoping for a miracle that would bless him with an heir to the throne. But as the years went by, his prayers remained unanswered, and his heart grew heavy with sorrow. One day, while walking through the palace garden, King Ezenna came across an old oak tree that stood tall and majestic. Its branches reached towards the sky, offering shade and shelter to all who sought refuge beneath its boughs. Feeling a sense of peace wash over him, the king sat down beneath the oak tree and closed his eyes in prayer. "Almighty God," he whispered, his voice filled with longing, "grant me the strength to accept your will, whatever it may be, and if it is not meant for me to have a son, then let me find peace in the love of my daughter Adobe." As King Ezenna prayed, a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves of the oak tree, as if in answer to his words, and in that moment, he felt a sense of calm wash over him, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. From that day forth, King Ezenna accepted that his fate was in the hands of the gods. He poured his love and devotion into Princess Adaobi, knowing that she was truly a gift from above. As the sun set on another day in the kingdom of Umore, the people marveled at the strength and wisdom of their beloved king. And though the future remained uncertain, they took comfort in the knowledge that as long as Princess Adaobi remained by their side, their kingdom would always be blessed with the love and prosperity. As Princess Adaobi grew older, the thought of marriage began to weigh on her father's mind, King Ezenna. He hoped that she would marry a noble prince who would one day succeed him as the ruler of Umore. But to his dismay, Adaobi rejected every prince who came seeking her hand in marriage. The king's disappointment grew with each rejection, especially when Adaobi turned down a prince from a very noble kingdom. This particular rejection pained deeply, for he had hoped that the union would strengthen the ties between their two kingdoms. One cool evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, King Ezenna sat down with his daughter in the palace gardens, his heart heavy with concern. He asked her, "Adaobi, my daughter, why do you keep rejecting men of dignity? What is it that you truly want?" Adaobi looked at her father with love and understanding in her eyes. "Papa," she replied softly, "when I see my soulmate, I will know. I cannot marry someone whom I do not love." The king sighed, feeling torn between the duty to the kingdom and his love for his daughter. He understood Adaobi's desire to marry for love, but he also knew that the future of Umore depended on her making a suitable match. As the days passed, King Ezenna pondered over his daughter's words, struggling to find a solution to the dilemma they faced. He consulted with his advisors and sought the counsel of the village elders, but no matter what he tried, he could not convince Adaobi to accept a marriage proposal. Meanwhile, Adaobi continued to focus on her duties to the kingdom, serving her people with kindness and compassion. She visited the villages, listening to the concerns of the people and offering her assistance whenever she could. But despite her dedication to her duties, Adaobi could not shake the feeling of unease that lingered in her heart. She longed for true love, a love that would fill her soul with happiness and fulfillment. One day, as Adaobi walked through the palace gardens, lost in thought, she stumbled upon a young man sitting beneath a flowering tree. His eyes sparkled with kindness, and a warm smile played upon his lips. In that moment, Adaobi felt a flutter of excitement in her heart. Could this young man be the one she had been waiting for? With a smile on her face, Adaobi approached the young man and struck up a conversation. They talked for hours, sharing their hopes, dreams, and aspirations. And as the sun began to set, Adaobi knew in her heart that she had found her soulmate. When she returned to the palace, Adaobi could hardly contain her joy as she told her father about the young man she had met. King Ezenna listened intently to his daughter's words, his heart filled with both happiness and relief, for he knew that Adaobi had finally found the love she had been searching for, and that was all that really mattered. And as the days passed, father and daughter shared a bond stronger than ever before, united in their love for each other and the kingdom they called home. Princess Adaobi couldn't shake the memory of the young man she had met earlier. Despite her best efforts, she hadn't been able to see him again, and she didn't even know his name or where he came from. Every day, Adaobi found herself returning to the spot where she had met the mysterious young man, hoping against hope that she would see him again. But each time, she was met with disappointment as he failed to appear. One day, as Adobe visited the spot once more, she felt a sense of sadness wash over her. She had begun to doubt whenever she would ever see the young man again. Maybe he was just a figment of her imagination, a fleeting dream that would never come true. As she turned to leave, resigned to the fact that she may never find him again, Adobe caught sight of him from afar. He was walking towards her, his clothes dirty from walking in the field, a hoe and cutlass in his hands. Without hesitation, Adobe ran towards him and threw her arms around him in a tight hug. The young man was surprised by her affection, wondering why someone of her stature would embrace him, a simple farmer, in such a manner. "Please sit down," Adobe said. "I have been searching for you." The young man, still bewildered by the princess's kindness, took a seat beside her. Adobe looked at him with curiosity in his eyes and asked, "What is your name?" The young man smiled shyly and replied, "My name is Izuna." As they sat beneath the tree, Adobe and Izuna talked for hours, catching up on each other's lives and sharing stories of their hopes and dreams. Adobe learned that Izuna was a farmer from the same village and that he do come to the palace gardens when he feels to catch some fresh air. Despite their different backgrounds, Adobe felt a deep connection with Izuna. She admired his hard-working nature and kind heart, and she found herself drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. As the sun began to set, Adobe and Izuna reluctantly parted ways, but not before making plans to meet at the same spot the next day. Adobe's heart soared with happiness as she walked back to the palace, knowing that she had finally found the love she had been searching for. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars twinkled in the night sky, Adobe and Izuna's love story began to unfold, filled with hope, laughter, and the promise of a bright future together. As Princess Adobe's love for Izuna blossomed, she found herself longing to spend every moment with him. Each day, she eagerly awaited their secret meetings beneath the flowering tree in the palace gardens. Adobe and Izuna would talk for hours, sharing their hopes, dreams, and fears. They laughed together, they cried together, and with each passing day, their bond grew stronger. But as much as Adobe cherished their time together, she knew that their love would face many obstacles. Izuna was a simple farmer from a humble village, while she was a princess destined to inherit the throne of Umore. Their worlds were vastly different, and Adobe feared that their love would not be accepted by her father, King Ezenna, or the people of the kingdom. Despite her worries, Adobe couldn't deny the depth of her feelings for Izuna. His kindness, humility, and unwavering love filled her heart with joy, and she knew that she could not imagine her life without him. One day, as Adobe and Izuna sat beneath the tree, lost in conversation, Adobe's thoughts turned to her father. She knew that she had to tell him about her love for Izuna. She feared his reaction. "Izuna," she said softly, taking his hand in hers, "there is something I must tell you. My father, King Ezenna, does not know about us yet. I fear that he would not approve of our love." Izuna looked at Adobe with understanding in his eyes. "I understand, my princess," he replied gently, "but no matter what happens, my love for you will never waver. I will stand by your side no matter what." With Izuna's words giving her courage, Adobe made the difficult decision to speak to her father about their love. She knew that she could not keep it a secret any longer, and she hoped that King Ezenna would find it in his heart to accept their love. That evening, Adobe approached her father in the palace gardens, her heart pounding with fear and anticipation. "Papa," she began, her voice trembling slightly, There is something I need to tell you. King Ezenna looked at his daughter with concern, sensing the seriousness of her tone. What is it, my dear? He asked, reaching out to take her hand. Taking a deep breath, Adobe gathered her courage and spoke from her heart. I have fallen in love, Papa, she said softly. His name is Izuna, and he's a farmer from a nearby village. King Ezenna listened to his daughter's words in silence, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he wanted nothing more than for Adobe to be happy, but on the other hand, he worried about the implications of her falling in love with a commoner. After a moment of contemplation, King Ezenna spoke, his voice filled with love and concern. My dear Adobe, he said, I want nothing more than for you to be happy, but I must also consider the welfare of our kingdom and our people. Adobe nodded, understanding her father's concerns. I know, Papa, she replied softly, but please give Izuna a chance. He is a good man, and his love for me is pure and true. With a heavy heart, King Ezenna promised to consider Adobe's request. He knew that their love would face many challenges, but he also knew that he would not stand in the way of his daughter's happiness. The next day, Adobe woke up with a spring in her step, eager to share the good news with Izuna. She hurriedly made her way to their meeting spot beneath the flowering tree, her heart fluttering with excitement. As she approached the tree, she saw Izuna waiting for her with a smile on his face. Adobe, he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with joy as he saw her approach. Adobe couldn't contain her excitement as she rushed towards Izuna. Izuna, my love, she said breathlessly, my father has given us his blessing. We can be together. Izuna's eyes widened in disbelief as he took in Adobe's words. True? He asked, his voice filled with wonder. Truly, Adobe confirmed, her heart soaring with happiness. Now we can plan our future together without any obstacles standing in our way. Izuna's heart swelled with gratitude as he pulled Adobe into a tight embrace. He couldn't believe that his dream of marrying the princess of Umore were finally coming true. After a little catching up, Izuna suggested that they go and visit his mother, Akaraka. Since she was the only parent he had, Adobe gladly accepted his invitation, eager to meet the woman who had raised the man she loved. Upon their arrival at Izuna's home, Adobe greeted Akaraka with a warm smile, eager to make a good impression. But before Izuna could even introduce her, his mother cut him off mid-sentence. You can't marry her, Akaraka said bluntly, her tone firm and uncompromising. Princess of Umore, with due respect, please let my son be. Adobe's heart sank at Akaraka's words, feeling the sting of rejection like a sharp blade. She couldn't understand why Izuna's mother would react so harshly to her presence. Feeling embarrassed and hurt, Adobe turned and ran off, tears streaming down her face. Izuna, shocked and bewildered by his mother's reaction, ran after her, calling out her name in desperation. But Adobe didn't stop running until she was out of sight, her heart heavy with sorrow and confusion. Back at the palace, Adobe ran past her parents with tears in her eyes, her breath coming in raged gasps. King Ezenna and Queen Olako were surprised to see their daughter in such a state, as they had never seen her like that before. Concerned for her well-being, Queen Olako ran after Adobe, determined to find out what had happened. She found her daughter sitting alone beneath a tree, her shoulders shaking with sobs. What happened, my dear? Queen Olako asked gently, placing a comforting hand on Adobe's shoulder. Through her tears, Adobe explained what had transpired at Izuna's home, recounting Akaraka's harsh words and hurtful rejection. Queen Olako's heart broke for her daughter, unable to fathom why anyone would speak to her in such a cruel manner. Without hesitation, Queen Olako went to her husband, King Ezenna, to tell him what had happened. The king's fury knew no bounds upon hearing how a commoner had insulted his daughter, the Princess of Umore. He immediately ordered his guards to find out who Izuna and his mother were, determined to get to the bottom of the matter and seek justice for his daughter's pain. Back at Izuna's house, he couldn't shake off the confusion and hurt he felt from his mother's harsh rejection towards Adobe, the Princess of Umore. Determined to understand the reason behind his mother's behavior, Izuna confronted her, his heart heavy with worry and concern. "Why did you react so harshly to Adobe, Mama?" Izuna asked, his voice filled with desperation. Akaraka hesitated, trying to conceal the truth from her son, but under the weight of Izuna's persistent questioning and pleading, she finally relented and decided to share the painful story that had haunted her for years. "Your father, Ozemena, was a close friend of King Ezenna," Akaraka began, her voice trembling with emotion. "He fought alongside Ezenna and even helped him become king. In return, Ezenna promised to make your father the kingmaker once he ascended the throne." Akaraka paused, her eyes filling with tears as she recalled the events that had shattered her family's happiness. "But after Ezenna became king, he forgot all his promises," she continued bitterly. "Years later, our village was attacked by our neighboring enemies. Many lives were lost, and some of our people were captured. We cried out for help, but Ezenna ignored our pleas." Akaraka's voice trembled as she recounted the events that had led to her husband's death. "Your father couldn't bear to see our people suffer, so he went to Ezenna for help once again," she said, her voice breaking with sorrow. "He led a group of men to attack our enemies and free the captured villagers, but during the fight, he was mortally wounded by a spear thrust to his ribs." Akaraka wiped away her tears, her heart heavy with grief as she remembered the pain of losing her beloved husband. "When your father returned home, he was in agony from his wounds," she continued, her voice choked with emotion. "He fought bravely until the end, but the pain was too much for him to bear. He died, leaving me alone to raise you, just a 2-year-old child." Tears streamed down Izuna's cheeks as he listened to his mother's heartbreaking story. He felt a surge of anger and resentment towards King Ezenna for betraying his father's trust and failing to fulfill his promises. "I understand now, Mama," Izuna said softly, his heart heavy with sorrow. "I had no idea of the pain and suffering our family had endured because of King Ezenna's betrayal. But I promise you, I will not let his actions dictate our future." With tears in their eyes, mother and son embraced, finding solace in each other's love and support. Throughout that night, Izuna tossed and turned, his mind consumed with thought of how to resolve the issue between his family and King Ezenna. He knew that he had to find a way to salvage the situation if he wanted to be with Adobe, the love of his life. The next morning, Izuna found his mother already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. He greeted her warmly and pleaded with her to speak with him. "No, ma'am, please," Izuna began, his voice filled with urgency. "I want to plead with you to forgive and forget all about what King Ezenna has ever done to us. I love Adobe so much that I can't bear to lose her. Please, Mama, consider my happiness. Biko Nem." Akaraka was deeply moved by her son's heartfelt plea. She could see the sincerity and love in his eyes, and she knew that she couldn't stand in the way of his happiness any longer. Odimma, Akaraka said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. I will do as you ask, my son. Your happiness means everything to me. With a heavy but hopeful heart, Izuna thanked his mother and left for his farm job. Akaraka silently prayed to the gods to protect her son and grant him his heart's desires. Meanwhile, King Ezenna received the details he had requested from his guards about Izuna and his mother. As he read through the information, he felt a pang of regret wash over him. He realized the pain and suffering he had caused Izuna's family by failing to fulfill his promises to his late friend Ozemena. He regretted his actions and wished he could turn back the hands of time. Determined to right his wrongs, King Ezenna made a solemn vow to himself to make things right with Izuna and his family. He knew that he had to seek forgiveness and make reparations if he ever hoped to regain their trust. As the cool evening breeze swept through the village, Akaraka made her way back from the market, her heart heavy with remorse for the way she had treated Princess Adobe. She spotted Adobe trying to hide from her, and a pang of guilt washed over her. Determined to make amends, Akaraka walked up to Adobe, her heart pounding with nervousness. She greeted the princess warmly, surprising Adobe with her unexpected kindness. My princess, I am sorry for the other day, Akaraka began, her voice filled with sincerity. I was hurting from the past, but everything is sorted out now. You are free to be with Izuna, and may the gods bless you too. Adobe was speechless, her eyes wide with astonishment at Akaraka's sudden change of heart. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. After a moment of stunned silence, Adobe found her voice and asked for a hug. Akaraka smiled warmly and pulled Adobe into a tight embrace, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She was grateful for the chance to make things right and mend the rift between their families. Meanwhile, Izuna returned home unaware of the encounter between Adobe and his mother. He hurriedly had his bath and rushed off to see Adobe, eager to apologize on behalf of his mother and to inform her that Akaraka, his mother, had given her blessings. But Akaraka tried to stop Izuna, wanting to tell him about the reconciliation between Adobe and herself. However, Izuna was too caught up in his excitement to listen, and he brushed off his mother's attempt to speak to him. He was so focused on seeing Adobe that he didn't realize the significance of what had transpired between the princess and his mother. All he could think about was apologizing to Adobe and sharing the good news with her. As Izuna made his way to see Adobe, his heart pounded with excitement and nervousness. He couldn't wait to apologize to her on behalf of his mother and to share the good news that Akaraka, his mother, had given her blessings for their relationship. When he reached the palace, Izuna asked the guards to let him see Adobe. They granted him entry, and Izuna hurried inside, eager to find Adobe and make things right between them. Meanwhile, Adobe was in her chambers, lost in thought about the unexpected encounter with Akaraka earlier that evening. She couldn't believe that Izuna's mother had apologized and given her blessings for their relationship. It was a moment of joy and relief for Adobe, knowing that their love could finally blossom without any hindrances. Just then, there was a knock on her door, and Adobe's heart skipped a beat as she wondered who it could be. She called out for the person to enter, and to her delight, Izuna stepped into the room. Izuna, Adobe exclaimed, her face breaking into a smile at the sight of him. I'm so sorry, Ada, Izuna began, his voice filled with sincerity. I wanted to apologize on behalf of my mother for the way she treated you. She has realized her mistakes and has given her blessings for our relationship." Adobe's eyes widened in surprise and joy at Izuna's words. She couldn't believe that Akaraka had a change of heart and had given her blessings for their love. "Oh, Izuna, that's wonderful news," Adobe exclaimed, her heart swelling with happiness. "I'm so glad that everything had been sorted out between us." Izuna smiled warmly at Adobe, relieved to see the joy in her face. "I'm glad too, Ada," he said, taking her hand in his. "Now we can be together without any worries or obstacles standing in our way." Adobe nodded, her heart filled with gratitude and love for Izuna. She knew that they had faced many challenges on their journey to happiness, but their love had prevailed in the end. As they sat together, hand in hand, Adobe and Izuna talked about their hopes and dreams for the future. They dreamed of a life filled with love, happiness, and prosperity, where they could be together forever. As the night fell and the stars twinkled in the sky, Adobe and Izuna's love story continued to unfold, with hope, joy, and promise of a bright future together. One sunny morning, King Ezenna sat in his throne room, feeling a heavy weight on his heart. He couldn't shake off the guilt and remorse he felt for the way he had treated Izuna's family, especially Akaraka, his late friend's wife. Deep down, King Ezenna knew that he had to make amends for his past mistakes. He couldn't bear the thought of causing any more pain and suffering to those he cared about. With a determined resolve, King Ezenna summoned his advisors and guards, instructing them to arrange a meeting with Akaraka and Izuna at their home. He knew that he had to apologize and seek forgiveness for the pain he had caused. When Akaraka and Izuna received the king's summons, they were surprised and curious about his sudden change of heart. They hesitated at first, unsure of what to expect, but ultimately decided to accept the king's invitation. As they arrived at the king's palace, they were greeted by the king's guards, who escorted them to the throne room. King Ezinna stood before them, his expression somber yet determined. "Izuna, Akaraka," the king began, his voice filled with sincerity. "I want to apologize to both of you for the way I treated your family in the past. I realize now that I have caused you a great deal of pain and suffering, and for that I am truly sorry." Akaraka and Izuna were taken aback by the king's words. They had never expected him to apologize so openly and sincerely. They listened intently as he continued to speak, pouring out his heart and expressing his remorse for his past actions. "I know that mere words cannot undo the pain I have caused you," the king said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I want you to know that I am committed to making things right. I will do whatever it takes to earn back your trust and forgiveness." Tears welled up in Akaraka's eyes as she listened to the king's heartfelt apology. She could see the sincerity in his eyes and felt a sense of relief wash over her. "I accept your apology, your majesty," Akaraka said softly, her voice filled with forgiveness. "And I appreciate your willingness to make amends. Let us put the past behind us and move forward with peace and understanding." Izuna nodded in agreement, feeling a sense of closure and healing wash over him. He knew that forgiving the king was the first step towards rebuilding their relationship and moving forward as a united kingdom. As they left the palace that day, Akaraka and Izuna felt a renewed sense of hope and optimism for the future. They knew that with forgiveness and understanding, anything was possible, and that their kingdom would thrive once again under the reign of a compassionate and humble king. The day of Adobe and Izuna's wedding finally arrived, and the entire kingdom of Umore was filled with excitement and joy. People from far and wide gathered to celebrate the union of their beloved princess with the man she loved, Izuna. The palace grounds were decorated with colorful flowers and banners, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter and music. Adobe looked radiant in her beautiful wedding gown, her eyes sparkling with happiness as she waited for Izuna at the altar. Izuna stood nervously at the altar, his heart pounding with anticipation. He couldn't believe that he was about to marry the woman of his dreams, the princess of Umore, Adobe. As the ceremony began, the king, Ezenna, stood before the gathered crowd, his voice filled with pride and happiness for his daughter. He spoke of love and unity, and of the bond that Adobe and Izuna shared, a bond that was destined to last a lifetime. Adobe and Izuna exchanged vows of love and commitment, promising to stand by each other through thick and thin, in sickness and in health, for as long as they both shall live. Their words were filled with sincerity and devotion, and their love shone brightly for all to see. As the ceremony drew to a close, Adobe and Izuna sealed their vows with a kiss, amidst cheers and applause from their family and friends. They were officially husband and wife, united in love and happiness. In the years that followed, Adobe and Izuna's love grew stronger with each passing day. They ruled the kingdom of Umore with wisdom and compassion, earning the respect and admiration of the people. And when the time came for King Ezenna to pass on to the next life and join his ancestors, he knew that the kingdom would be in good hands with Izuna as the new king. Izuna had proven himself to be a worthy successor, a leader who cared deeply for his people and always put their needs above his own. As Adobe and Izuna stood together, overlooking the kingdom they now ruled, they knew that their love had truly stood the test of time. They were not just husband and wife, but partners in life and in leadership, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. And so, as the sun set on another day in the kingdom of Umore, Adobe and Izuna's love story came to a beautiful and fulfilling conclusion. They had overcome obstacles, faced adversity, and emerged victorious, their love shining brightly for all eternity. The most important lesson in this story is that love conquers all obstacles. Despite facing challenges such as social status, past grievances, and familiar expectations, Adobe and Izuna's love for each other remained unwavering. Through forgiveness, understanding, and determination, they overcame adversity and united their families and kingdom. Their story teaches us that love has the power to heal wounds, bridge divides, and create a brighter future, showing that with patience, compassion, and commitment, love can triumph over any obstacle. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures, where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, share, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.